Hello, folks. Today we are going to talk about the war impact on global supply chain in changing situation. We have been discussing this topic for last few weeks since the war has broke between U.S., Israel, and Iran. And I have been saying that there are three major avenues we have to look at: the geopolitical, the religious, and the global supply chain impact of this war. A lot of people look at the religious impact more than look at the geopolitical impact, and then very few people really look at the global supply chain impact. It is different than economic impact. Of course, economic impact and global supply chain impact are interrelated, but still, I think it is very important for us as business, especially supply chain folks, to understand the supply chain impact and what could we foresee and how should we plan. Because one major job of supply chain folks is really, planning, uh, planning the horizon and trying to, make sure their forecast is as accurate as possible. So we really need to look at the supply chain impact. And today we are going to really make that effort and see how the changing, scenario and whatever is happening in the, in the changing global um, geopolitical scenario, how is that impacting supply chain, and how should we really adjust our forecast, and what should we really promise to our customers, and how should we really network better with our supply base. So, um, first of all, let's look at the geopolitical changing realities so that we can understand our supply chain realities. So the changing reality of geopolitical situation is that both America and Iran had very good discussion in Pakistan. People thought that it was not a lot of positive impact. I believe there was a lot of positivity if you really look at from very neutral and bigger picture perspective. When you have a very big, complicated, and long-term mistrust, then of course you cannot really solve that such a big issue in just matter of few hours. I mean, yeah, 21 hours discussion, maybe 15 out of 21, and maybe they took some rest. But expecting the entire resolution in this first discussion, it wasn't really, you know, it wasn't really practical. It is very, very important to think it and look at this problem, in a very systematic way, and try to decipher the problem and then figure out a solution in a very, I'd say systematic way and more rational way. So let's look at this, that the very important achievement in this whole war situation was for parties to recognize the issue and even try to see each other, meet each other, understand each other, and then come to some bottom lines. Of course, when parties start, they each have their maximum position, and then the anchor gets set. And then I told you before that there are three dimensions of negotiation we should always look at, and that is, of course, the technical, which is really the base and the foundation. Unfortunately, very few people look at the technical side of negotiation. The tactical, which is basically what most people do, and they just play tactics, try to resolve a strategic problem. And then, of course, the strategic side. I do believe that Iran really went to the meeting with lots and lots of authority, and they were ready to make the decision, and they have the decision makers right there and then. And they had a very technical data, and then very strategic and, a very, I'll say, analytical people with them who could analyze and advise. I'm not saying that who took harder position. I'm saying who had more technical ability to analyze and advise and had more, I'd say, strategic reasoning and also strategic decision making to advise back. So, I mean, JD Vance, our vice president, who was sent there, and he went with with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and maybe some other people. To be honest, next time when JD Vance goes to any of those meetings, first of all, JD Vance was a very high power, very good strategic decision to send JD Vance. He had a little bit of trust of from all sides, because Iranian also know that JD Vance had a little different position on this war, and then Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, because it's a very bigger belief that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner have very close alignment with Bibi Netanyahu, and it's very unfortunate that Israel really is a major reason of this war, but that was certainly not on the table. However, um, Israel has so much authority that they were actually really maneuvering the decision. And I think that is really, let me say, a biggest spoiler in this thing, because Israel is not looking for closure because it doesn't work for them. Any sort of closure at this point, no matter what happened to the world economy, world peace, our long-term, economic situation, certainly global supply chain, they are not interested in that. Their interest is really that Iran somehow get finished or get to a point where they do not remain a threat, because that is really the biggest thorn in their eyes, in their whole plan of becoming the biggest power in the region, and hence then been easily able to expand their territory and get to their original dream of bigger, greater Israel. So for that reason, it does not suit Israel at all to finish the war. And the other thing is that for Bibi Netanyahu, it doesn't really satisfy his political goals either, because if he really goes home when the war has no conclusion and has very bad impact on his economy, his people, his infrastructure, and yet he didn't achieve any goal, can you imagine his political situation? He will absolutely will be crucified, and he will not be able to hold to his power. So he doesn't care what happens to the entire world peace. His focus really is that he gets some major wins. Now, United States role, on the other hand, especially Trump, it's very unfortunate that our government, especially President Trump, has a huge influence on him from Israel, especially from Bibi Netanyahu, because in the last 40, 50, 60 years since the birth of Israel, Israel has been pressurizing US presidents to to strike Iran, and all presidents basically denied, and they tried to figure out the solution with dialogue. And of course, Israel was not too happy. Trump really, to my surprise, was the first president who actually decided to go to war with Iran. I mean, honestly, there are many people like me who voted for, who voted really for, uh, you know, Mr. Trump, is because we thought that he was very much against wars. He's a very business oriented person. He's more of a business and peace person. If there was one thing very clear to me where I got sold, that he basically is a business person, and he was very anti war, because he very openly stood against Iraq war. And Iraq war was known as a very bad move based on bad information. And guess on whose advice? Certainly on Israel's advice. And if you look at the old CIA files, it is very, very clear that it's abundantly clear that Israel has been, pushing for, really finishing most of these countries. And there are clearly names in Greater Israel strategy to get rid of certain countries like Iraq. Iraq was enemy number one. Then it was Egypt, then it was Syria, then it was Libya, and so all these countries which are pretty economically powerful countries, decent sized countries, and countries who would openly oppose Israel, they were on their hit list. And then the last country in the hit list was Iran. And now all those countries, excuse me, are taken care of except Iran. And now they want to really get rid of Iran. But they didn't realize that Iran is not Iraq. Iran has a very, very well organized army, and then also a well organized militia. And they have a very good belief system, and also an important history. And then also they are very strict followers of Imam Hussein, Raziallah ta'ala anhu, peace be upon him, who was the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who actually uh, stood against oppression, and he chose to, get killed in the Battle of Karbala, which is really now in Iraq. But he did not, accept Yazid, who was the oppressor at that time. So, even though Imam Hussein only had 72 total people, were including children, ladies, women, and children, he had 72 people with him, but he still did not accept to bow in front of Yazid, who was the oppressor. So these are people are the followers of Imam Hussein. May God be pleased with him. And so Trump doesn't know all that, and unfortunately, his strategists don't know all that. And I'm sure Israel and Bibi Netanyahu know that, but they wouldn't really indulge that kind of information. They'd rather go and make a presentation in the situation room in White House, which was very unheard of, and they convinced Trump. And even though J.D. Vance and many other cabinet members were not too happy, but they were able to convince Trump, and Trump thought that we'll go with the tactics and we go with the pressure, we'll do the shock and awe, and Iran would basically collapse inside and outside. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. And matter of fact, I would say might be there is a good reason for us to learn from our mistakes, and understand that how we need to prepare in the new realities of China and Russia and technologies, and resilience. So I thought we will learn. And that's the reason I have kept saying that this war would not continue very long, because it's very, very bad for the global economy and US economy as well. It's very, very bad for the world peace, and it is also very bad for American led world order. It's not going to keep America as a leader if America continue the same rhetoric. So I thought Trump is very tactical in nature, but when these type of people who are businessmen and they're very tactical in nature, they change the course, they correct their course even in the halfway when they see that things are going in a different winds are going in different direction. And I thought Trump tried to do that when he was actually threatening, with very big words, with some even almost unethical words, non-business words, non-professional words, and he was basically thinking that he's gonna scare Iran, And then he was thinking he's going to do shock in Iran. Unfortunately, every single effort failed. And then when they sat on the table, everybody had a sigh of relief. And even the market really liked it. But unfortunately, spoilers came in and they spoiled it. Now I'm very, very skeptical that if this war would really end soon, because the spoiler has a very big control. And I meant here Bibi Netanyahu has a very, very strong influence, and he even used the word that J.D. Vance reported me. That was Israel's official TV showing official, translated uh, conference of Bibi Netanyahu, where Bibi is saying that J.D. Vance reported me the situation as they do, as their cabinet do every day. So that's kind of pretty sad situation. But anyway, I wanted to give you this whole geopolitical scenario so you can understand the impact on global economy and then global supply chain. So, what is the impact on global supply chain? Before we look at that, let's look at the situation now that there's another tactic in play where I think Trump is now told that, in when we were kids, we were given a puzzle that how do you separate these two rings, and then to separate these two rings, you have to add a third ring, and then get the first ring out and the second ring out. So this is the type of situation that, okay, they already have Strait of Hormuz, where this is very, very narrow. It's only 21 mile, and according to the international law, 12-mile width is considered territorial water, not international water. And so, if you take Oman portion and Iran's portion, it is really territorial water for both of them at the narrowest point. So then it becomes 24 mile, which is less than, the mileage is only 21 mile, the Strait of Hormuz, but the 20 up to 24 mile is considered territorial water, and that's the reason Iran has never accepted this Strait of Hormuz as the international water, and that's the reason Oman and Iran want to control it. So now that takes us from geopolitical to logistic point of view and legal point of view. So basically, that Iran and Oman think that that is territorial water and hence it's not international water, whereas Trump and company think that we can resolve this problem by adding another circle. So Iran had the narrow portion of the circle of Strait of Hormuz, and then if US put barricade and made another circle, so now you have circle outside of the circle. And how's that impacting supply chain? Just think about it. If you had one door and now you put another door, it does not make your bottleneck better. It actually worsen your bottleneck. So yes, it will put a little bit pressure on Iran, but if Iran want to just rely on their own resources, they are a big country and they have decent resources on their own. They have their own oil supply, they have their own energy supply, they have their own water, they have their own farming. They are pretty self-sufficient. Yes, it will be difficult. It will be sufficient, but then also they have lots of other borders. They have several other borders, land borders, and where they can get stuff from Russia, China, even Afghanistan, and even Pakistan and other places. So who is going to get impacted out of that is basically major, you know, big buyers. And who are the major big buyers of Iranian oil? Really, first of all, it's going to be all the Europeans, because Europeans cannot go through Strait of Hormuz. Now, who was going through right now? It was the Chinese vessels which were going through, and China buy more than 50% of Iranian's oil. Some people say 90%, but overall, China's total requirement, 50% of China's requirement is satisfied with Iran's oil. So who's going to get impacted? China. And what portion of China's production goes to America and Europe? You can figure it out. It's more than 50%. So if China has supply chain issue, who's gonna see higher cost, difficulty in buying things, and big supply chain constraint. Who's gonna see that? Believe it or not, America would be a major receiver of that difficulty. So we're not realizing it's just like same thing which Trump put his tariff and he thought we can solve the problem with the tariff and I'm gonna produce so much revenue, but didn't realize that by putting $10 of tariff in any country, he added that he compounded the problem and he put $20 for the US goods. Because now if Canadian goods or Chinese goods are having tariff, they're gonna get more expensive, and then none of these goods are produced in isolation. We live in global village. Now a lot of material goes from US to Canada and even to China to throughout the world. So what happens? Now you are paying tariff, and then you, we are paying tariff, and then we are collecting tariff. So the cost of the goods are increasing. And when the cost of goods are increasing, what's going to happen to commodity pricing and everyday product pricing for consumer? And the consumer is going to see the pinch, and we have seen the pinch. Look at this. What's the gallon of gas? Even though we have a lot of our own gas, but the gallon of gas used to be $3, around $3. At the beginning of the war, now it's around $4. Look at the price of milk, price of eggs, price of all those basic commodities have really going through the roof. And then, of course, the housing market slow down, the material prices are up, and then you can imagine what's going to happen. So, likewise, if the oil, get difficulty in delivery from Iran to China, China is not going to be happy. If China is not happy, what's going to happen? They're not going to be happy with the US. And Trump has a plan to visit China in May. So it's a major global impact. So it's not the blockade is not that simple. And I don't know how that's going to help the situation. It might get only one thing to US is that share in the toll from the state of Hormuz. If that is the goal, then I think we could probably achieve that goal to a certain extent by putting a blockade there. But rest assured, that means oil prices going up, more than more than what they have now, because you're going to have two tolls which you did not have before, and the toll amount Iran is looking at is somewhere around 40 to 100 billion dollars, and then of course the petrodollar can get impacted. So I think US can achieve some goals for face saving and maybe collect some revenue, but as far as not giving certain things in lieu to Iran, it's just not going to happen. And that would be basically, relaxing their sanctions. That would be, committing to peace. And that's not bad, because if that happens, your global supply chain situation will slowly get better. And if that does not happen, uh, you should plan for lots of difficulty for next year or two. However, I do envision that one way or the other, even though Israel would not like to resolve this problem, in my humble opinion, and forgive me, I could be wrong, but I think if you do the analysis, the stakeholder analysis, there is one stakeholder who does not see uh, this war ending at their benefit, doesn't see it. So one spoiler may not want it, but if sanity prevail with the American strategist and decision maker, and at this point with Trump, then you could see some ease in war, and hence ease in global supply chain and global trade, global logistics, and hence the pricing and people's lifestyle. Otherwise, there's lots and lots of difficulty to come. May God bless all of us, and may God give us peace. Thank you.